The Hot Pot Show season. Wait, mumesahau season 2. Swahili Pot family, what is this?
Hot Pot Show season 2.
Kabisa. This, yeah, tuko na drone hapa. Wacha tuseme tena, drone moment ndio hii. Sawa guys. Aya, 1, 2, 3. Swahili Pot family, what is this?
Hot Pot Show season 2.
Asanteni sana. Wacha tukate keki ya Hot Pot Show season 2.
Asanteni sana, and I wish you all the best in season 2 of Hot Pot Show. Oh, group photo. Okay. As they are taking the group photo, breakout season 3, breakout session 3, it's about to begin here. And breakout session 4 is going to be at the amphitheater. I'll let you know in a moment. Thank you very much. Aya.
Ati black chocolate ni fine melanin bana kutoka nikapate kanapenda genye mimi wanapenda so kanapenda toto chupa na haga nono.
Aya. DJ kidogo tu. Important announcement, breakout session 3 tumesema itafanyika hapa. Breakout session 4 itakuwa katika eneo la amphitheater pale ukiwa na Noni, na the topic is on bonyeza upate dola. Bonyeza upate dola itakuwa inaendelea katika amphitheater in the next few. It's already 3:35, but allow me right now to start breakout session 3 here, and I believe the guests are already here. The moderator is going to be Nation Njoroge. Mr. Nation Njoroge, asante sana kwa kufika. Nation Njoroge is the physical planner, Mombasa County Government. Karibu sana jukwani. This is going to be our moderator, and partners who will be in this. Naarifiwa pia kuna gari imeblock watu kutoka KBB. Matatu KBB, tafadhali nenda ukaitoe. Asante sana. Part of the partners we have Nyanjala Maingu. Thank you very much. Nyanjala Maingu is from Visionary. Aya, Baba Z hapa kidogo ameghafilika, anasema ni KBB 487M. Karibu sana Nanjala from Visionary Heritage and Arts. Sukaina Al Hussein, Mombasa Tourism Council. Sukaina Al Hussein, Mombasa Tourism Council. Professor Mike Tanner, I'm informed, is going to be online. Kwa hiyo watu wa media, please tutayarishe. Karibu sana Sukaina. Professor Mike Tanner is going to be online from Heritopolis. Michael Kinyanjui from UN Habitats. Okay, thank you very much Ndegwa. We have Abu Talib Muhammad from Kijumwa Heritage Hub in Lamu. Abu Talib Muhammad, thank you very much. And we will have Dr. Kalanda Khan. This is a lecturer from TUM. Dr. Kalanda Khan. Okay. Nation, you may take over now. Yeah. So, Mr. Nation,
Hello
Karibu.
everyone. Hello. Wow. Well, I feel so honored to be here. Na pia this is a big challenge. Juu watu wametoka kukata keki alafu sasa mnataka kusikia mambo za history. Well, I hope you'll be tuned in for whatever we have to offer and also discuss. By a show of hands, how many here have ever heard about urban heritage? Urban heritage, wangapi? Right. So keep that in mind. By the time we're finishing this session, we'll still do another round of quiz to see how far we've been able to impart that knowledge on you, on everyone here. So without further ado, I'd like to start this session by introducing the topic. And the topic is on future metropolis. Future metropolis, resilience and heritage in coastal region, and localizing Sustainable Development Goal, SDG 11. Now with me, I have the panelists. Amjambo. Hi everyone. So I'll start with, they say ladies first. Na nimeona moja shashika mic. So, Sukaina, the tech team. One mic is not working. So we'll go to, both mics are not working? Need assistance, please. Right. Is also Professor Mike Turner, is he on? Right, so pardon that kidogo, tuko na shida ya kimitambo but tunaendelea kutatua.
Hello?
Great. Right, so I'd like to start with introducing Professor Mike Turner. Mike, are you with us? Can you hear me? Mike? Wow, so the other mic is also not on. Now, okay, ladies first, we'll start with Sukaina. Please, can you introduce yourself before we get to Professor Mike Turner?
Okay, assalamu alaikum and hi everyone. So my name is Sukaina Al-Husseini. By profession, I'm an economic and business developer. But today I'm here to represent Mombasa Tourism Council as a board member in to do with economic development in area of tourism. Yeah.
Thank you. Next, please.
Habari ya mchana, jina langu ni Nyanjala Maingu na ni Youth Engagement Lead wa GIN Tanga na pia ni head wa Art and Creative katika program ya GIN Tanga. Asante. Na leo niko kwa ajili ya sauti ya vijana, sio tu wa Tanga mpaka wa Mombasa.
Asante sana.
Assalamu alaikum. Na mimi kwa majina ni Abu Talib Mohammed. By profession, I'm a civil engineer, but I deal with urban heritage and I'm a built heritage conservation officer. I chair the Lamu Heritage Site Community Organization. And even I'm the coordinator of the only heritage hub in Lamu, which is the Kijumo Heritage Hub. Thank you.
Wow. Umesikia hizo zote? Umesikia? I just wish to see how his business card looked like, you know. So, ningependa pia, before we go to Professor Mike Turner, I would like to also introduce our distinguished panelists. Welcome. Karibu sana. Yeah, so tuko na representative wa Gen Z hapa ameingia tu sasa hivi. Dr. Kalandar. Hello. Please, can someone get a mic for Doctor, please? Please introduce yourself. We're just doing the introduction.
Hello, good afternoon. My name is Kalanda, just like a calendar, but it starts with a K, so that you cannot forget my name 12 months in a year. It hangs on the wall. Thank you. I'm from Technical University of Mombasa. Previously, I used to work with the National Museums of Kenya. I worked there half of my life. I will not tell you my age.
Yeah, he's a Gen Z by heart. You can see that, yeah? So at this point, I'd like to introduce Mike Turner. Mike, are you on? Can you hear me? Sorry, Mike, I can't hear you. Yes? Somebody unmute Mike, please. Hello. Please, can you start by introducing yourself? Yes, please.
I'm a friend of Calendar, and I won't also tell you how old I am, but I'm also currently the president of the Heritopolis Society, which is UN Habitat initiative looking at heritage in the metropolis, and together with Swahili Pot, we're very much involved with the modern heritage of Africa. I'm really excited to be here again in Swahili Pot in Mombasa. Over.
Thank you, Mike, for the introduction. Well, I'd like to take these few minutes, like 3 minutes, just to gauge the expectation in the room. Can somebody please, what are you looking forward to in the session? Maybe we can have that and then we'll hand over to Mike to start the presentation. Because this is about urban heritage. That, by random, anyone? What's the thing that you want to hear from this session? Yeah, Mike.
I'm not giving it out again. Hi everyone. Good afternoon. My name is Umi Sadiq. I'm a youth advisory group member under Global Opportunity Youth Network, GOYON, but also supporting the Heritage Department under Swahili Pot. So my main aim is to understand the urban heritage and how as youth we are able to promote heritage because we are leaders of today and our today is here. Thank you so much.
All right, thank you so much. So just to frame this discussion, we'll be looking at issues on urban heritage. And with urban heritage, we'll want to see how Mombasa as a coastal region can be able to leverage on the urban heritage or the historical leverage that it has to be able to attain sustainability in terms of the Sustainable Development Goal number 11 and what that portends for our county. And with that, we'd like to get more information on urban heritage. So I'd like to offer this chance to Professor Mike Turner to be able to proceed with this presentation before we can now get to the crux of this discussion. Thank you. Over to you, Mike.
Right. Thank you so much. I won't make a visual presentation, although I do have one ready. I would just first of all like to define urban heritage. First of all, heritage is nothing to do with the past. Heritage is what we pass down to future generations. So it is what we do in the present that is heritage. And it is therefore, it is essentially then about the present and what we do and what we pass on to the future. So that is the first definition of heritage which we have to understand. The second one is urban. What is urban? First of all, it relates to a place, a location in a city. But it also relates then to characteristics. What is the quality, what is happening, and the visual and the activities of people within the city. And I think that these are the two critical definitions which we have to go with. And I think that when we look at that, we can say, understand exactly that urban heritage belongs to today, it belongs more than buildings, and therefore I say that Sheng, which is then the urban language in Kenya, is really something very special. On one last point before I can give it over, is that the idea of identities. I have many times asked people, how would you identify yourself in one word? And most people will give their town. They won't say I'm from Kenya, they'll say I'm from Mombasa. People will use their town as giving themselves identity. And I think that this is something which we have to deal with. And in a metropolis which is so large, we have to then break it up and have then the multiple identities which each neighborhood and each period of history can give. Over.
Thank you, Mike. I can assume that's your presentation.
Well, I was told to only speak and not to make the presentation. But I can put the presentation on if you want.
Well, I think we do have time to be able to have like a quick 7-minute presentation.
Okay, so how do I share the screen?
Well, okay.
Can you see? Can you see now?
Yep. Put it in presentation mode.
Yeah. Is that in presentation mode?
No, not yet. Right. I think as that's being sorted out. Oh, there we go. Can enlarge, maximize that tab, the presentation tab. Yep, there we go. Put it in full screen and then that presentation.
Put it in full screen.
Yep, the PowerPoint. Put it in full screen and then start.
Full screen. Stop presuming.
I think that's good enough. You can proceed.
Wait a minute.
Yep, can proceed.
Is this is that it? Says full screen.
Yep. Put it on. So if as we sort that out, I guess we can be able to see the direction of this discussion. We have threats being discussed. We have the perceptions that are also being projected on our screen. So maybe, Professor Mike, first question will be, in your view or from your experience, what you've already answered to this, but what can you say constitutes urban heritage?
Well, I've really said about these things that it's people. This is what constitutes urban heritage. The people that build, and they're the people that live there, and they're the people that create the heritage. And seeing that I mentioned previously that heritage belongs to today, therefore it is what we do in passing on to the next generation.
Oh, thank you. And during the projection, I saw you had some a part on threats to urban heritage. Possibly, maybe you can talk about the threats that you feel might be abound in our urban heritage, especially for coastal cities like Mombasa.
Yeah.
The threats.
Well, I think that I thought about this and I looked at the World Heritage because Port Giges is on the World Heritage list. And I then saw that every list of things about, about urban development, about climate change, etc. And I thought that there's only one word which I would give for threats, and that is arrogance. Arrogance is a quality, an attitude of superiority manifested in an overbearing manner or presumptuous claims or assumptions. It is being unpleasantly proud and behaving as if you are more important than or more than other people or places. And I think that arrogance sums up all our threats. It is arrogance against nature, which is bringing us on the climate, not change, but climate extremes. And we must go for nature-based solutions. So this is really where we need to be if we're dealing with nature. And if we're dealing with people, then it's in arrogance about what we think that we can do in our society. And I think that in this way, we can then make a better way of working, because a city is a dialogue. It's a dialogue between people, between communities, between buildings. They speak to each other. They address each other. And design is good manners. Over.
Wow, thank you. That's so profound. Possibly, I've seen you're part of the Heteropolis conversation, of Heteropolis group. For those of us who are here and they'd like to know more, what is Heteropolis? Because in a way, for me, that urban background, that sounds like a paradox. Can you really have a polis made of heritage without anything new? Is it possible to freeze, or as you said, nothing about the past but what you pass into the future, but more or less we try to conserve when it comes to heritage. So can you really have a polis that is, you know, all about the heritage of that place? Or what's this Heteropolis that you mentioned?
Yeah, thanks for that. That's really good. A real oxymoron. Yeah. So, but I think that what we first of all have to know the metropolis. If in fact 2007 we became urban, by 2035 or 33, in other words, within another 10 years, we will all be most of us will live in metropolises. The fact is that every 2 weeks, a new metropolis will appear on the world, and most of them will be in Africa. Now, this is exponential growth. So therefore, the first thing is that we have to know that the metropolis is then an important part of where we are. Now, the city is no longer sustainable because it needs a hinterland. Where do I have the food and the market gardening? Where do I have my recreation? Where do we have then the other aspects of biodiversity around us? So a metropolis, strangely enough, is a problem, but it's also a solution. So that's the first thing which we have to understand. We then came about and thought about that heritage is more than just simply understanding buildings. And what we try to be able to say is that the metropolis is in fact the heritage. It is within that. So this is what we've actually believed in, is that heritage and the metropolis, we have to somehow bring them together. In other words, sustainable development is only when we include cultural and natural heritage. When we in fact then just have no heritage, then it becomes then purely speculative development, something which in the end will just hit us where we came from. So we set up this proposal within UN Habitat, not within UNESCO, which is interesting. And UN Habitat have embraced us. And I think that that's why we feel that this is something which could be really important. And it is an international initiative linking heritage and the metropolitan issues. And it's an open-ended partnership of 22 universities and metropolises, of which, in fact, Capita with the Technical University of Mombasa, Swahili Pod are key partners. The Heteropolis is also individual experts and institutions, and it's around the world. It's from Santiago de Chile, Rio de Janeiro, it's in Korea, Sydney, in Shanghai, and of course many places in Europe. So I think that this is where we can get our heads around the future. Africa is going to be the most important urban areas in the next decades. And when we start bringing heritage towards understanding the design of the Heteropolis, then we're going to really have some good place to move to.
All right, thank you so much. Now, Nanjala.
Naam.
Hujambo?
Sijambo, assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum salam.
Uko vizuri?
Alaikum salam.
Usinaibishe jamani. Tanisamea Kiswahili yangu ni ile nasikia siku hizi kuna jina ama tamko la mishaveve.
Bila shaka. Hata mimi Kiingereza kinatetemeka hapa nilipo.
Sawa. Basi kwa wale ambao we have international guests, kwa hivyo nitabidi nichanganye mara kwa mara. But ningependa kukuuliza swali la kwanza. Je, umetaja mambo ya youth.
Ndio.
You work closely with the youth. So swali langu la kwanza ama my first question will be, katika when handling the youth, there is innovation, and even the theme of this week is innovation. What role do you think innovation plays in advancing urban heritage? And you can give us practical examples with the work that you do.
Kwanza ni swali nzuri sana, and tuko kwenye Pwani Innovation Week na kila mtu ameongelea masuala ya heritage na nimesikia masuala ya identity. So please nitaongea Kiswahili kwa sababu ninasikia hata vijana wakisema anguka nayo. So mimi kama nilivyojitambulisha, ni kweli nafanya kazi na vijana na I'm just youth related person. Na vijana kiukweli kabisa wana nguvu kubwa sana, na tukiangazia swala hilo, kama vijana watapewa elimu ama uelewa wa masuala ya urithi wa kwao hasa wa kiutamaduni, na wakaweza moja kwa moja kushirikishwa katika elimu. Tunaelewa youth wana graduate after some time, umri ukipita anakuwa ni mkubwa. Kwa hiyo wanaibeba ile, na wanapoibeba inaweza kwanza kufanya watambue. Kwanza wana technology na huku wanatambua kwamba urithi wao ni nini. Ni rahisi wao kuwa wabunifu kwa sababu innovation ni kuhusiana na masuala ya kibunifu. Sasa ni jukumu letu kwa pamoja kuwajengea hawa vijana uwezo ajitambue. Kwa mfano mimi umesema Nyanjala, ni lazima nijue kwa nini ni Nyanjala jina langu. Kwa hiyo linapokuja kwenye swala la miji, tunaelewa daktari na professor amesema kwenye mji like city kuna kuwa na metropolis, miji mingine midogo midogo. Basi huyu kijana aelewe ni kwa nini nyumba zao ziko vile zilivyo, kwa nini jamii pana iko hivyo ilivyo in terms ya majengo, na kutokana na changamoto zinazopatikana, je, ni kwa namna gani tufanye ili tuwe na makazi bora. Hilo ni la kwanza. Na la pili tunaloweza kufanya ni kuwa na miradi inayoongozwa na vijana, na ninaomba nipongeze kwamba Swahili Pot imekuwa ikifanya hivyo sana na kwa tija. Vijana wanapoongoza hiyo miradi, moja kwa moja ubunifu unakuwa ndani yao. Angalia hii venue ilivyo, kuna modernity humu ndani, lakini kuna urithi, kuna mali ninaona mapambo ambayo yako Pwani, yako humu. Na ninaamini haya ni mawazo ya vijana, kwamba tunapoongelea Pwani tunayohitaji, walisema basi tuwe na theme ya namna hii ambayo itaendana na nani. Kwa hiyo basi vijana tuwaruhusu waweze kuongoza hiyo miradi. Lakini la tatu ambalo ni kubwa sasa ni kuhusiana na masuala ya teknolojia. Vijana kama vijana wanaweza kutumia teknolojia kuleta smart cities au metropolis kwa namna yao. Kwa mfano, leo nikitaka kuja Mombasa, Swahili Pot wana page ambao anakuambia kwamba ni vitu gani kama mtalii utafanya. Kwa hiyo tayari kupitia simu yako unaelewa kwamba nikifika Mombasa nitafanya nini, na wanaenda mbali kutumia teknolojia, wanakupa taarifa kwamba labda itagharimu shilingi ngapi, utaenda wapi, possibly utakutana na nani, na kile utakachoangazia ni nani atakupa ile taarifa ya kina. Na hawajaishia, siku hizi wana QR code ambayo unaweza ukascan na ukapata taarifa. Kwa hiyo hayo yote ni matumizi ya teknolojia ambayo vijana wanafanya, na yanaweza kabisa kuleta ubunifu katika miji ya kiendelevu tunayoitazamia.
Asante. Nimesikia sijui kama umesema Hadija, lakini nimesikia majengo pia hapo, na huku kwetu kuna majengo na Hadija pia wako majengo. Lakini ningependa kuuliza swali la pili. Umetaja jinsi ambavyo vijana wanaweza wanaweza kuwa involved katika urban heritage na conservation. Je, kulingana na historia ama kazi unayofanya, umetumia mbinu gani kuhakikisha vijana kweli wanahusika katika miradi ya conservation ya urban heritage na mambo ya regeneration, yani kuweza kukuza ubunifu wa zaidi wa kuweza kuendeleza maeneo yao?
Asante. Kwa moja hatujawa na kitu ambacho tumefanya, lakini kuna vitu ambavyo vimefanyika, kwa mfano matumizi ya VR and AR, ambapo kwa mtu ambaye atahitaji kuangazia historia ya jumba la kifalme kule Uingereza, anaweza akaona ni uwiano wa watu wangapi ambao wanapenda kuangazia historia lile jumba, na kila mtu akaweza kupata taarifa sahihi kwa kutumia mtandao. Na pia Pempol, katika mji wa Pempolis wanatumia pia ziara za kimtandao kuweza, wanasema visualization ya ule mji na kuweza kujifunza. Kwa hiyo mtu anaweza akasearch sehemu, akawa na keyword, akasearch na akaweza kupata taarifa iliyo sahihi kwa kutumia Google Map. Hiyo ni kitu ya kwanza. Na kwa Tanga tulichoweza kufanya mpaka sasa hivi, tulikuwa na ecosystem mapping, na through the ecosystem mapping sasa hivi tunaweza kudadavua mtaa, kata na Tanga nzima ikoje, kwamba wapi utapata museum, wapi utapata maeneo ya kwenda kufanya utalii wa kuogelea. Kwa hiyo hiyo pia ni teknolojia ambayo tumeweza kufanya, lakini na kujifunza pia. Na kingine ni mikakati ya mahusiano ya kijamii. Hiyo tumeweza kufanya kwa sababu kwa Tanga sasa hivi tumeweza kuunganisha vijana kutoka mtaa, nyie mnaita mashinani na Tanga nzima kwa kutumia WhatsApp group. Kwa hiyo pale tunaweza kupata push and pull information and feedback, na imekuwa ni rahisi kuwakusanya vijana na wakaweza kuangazia mambo yao. Yani tumewapatia kitu, kwa Kiingereza wanasema platform. Tumewapa jukwaa ambalo vijana wanaweza wakakaa wakaongea mambo yao, wakaangazia changamoto na wakaja na masuluhu ambayo yanatatua matatizo yao. Na hili ni pale ambapo tutaweka msisitizo wa vijana kubeba ajenda yao, na ajenda ya utamaduni na kutambulika ni ajenda ambayo vijana wanataka. Na nikirejea, profesa amesema masuala ya Sheng. Ukifika Kenya utakutana na Sheng, lakini ukifika Tanga utakutana na kitu kingine. Vijana wana namna yao, na yote inakuwa ni rahisi zaidi kwa kutumia majukwaa kama TikTok, Instagram. Kwa hiyo hii yote ni role ya teknolojia, na vijana wa Tanga wanafanya, lakini tunajifunza zaidi kwa wenzetu wa Mombasa.
Asante sana. Well, wajua mimi pia nimesoma Kiswahili.
Karibu.
Mimi naelewa maana ya kudadavua, lakini kuna wale hapa hawaelewi kudadavua ni nini. Wajua hapa kuna Gen Z, ukisema kudadavua kutakuwa na ngoma kesho inaitwa kudadavua. Singependa itumie vibaya. Kudadavua maanisha nini?
Kudadavua, it's identifying and explain it.
Umesikia? Na amesema jambo nzuri kweli kuhusu, okay. Pia kuna social media. How many of you umeona sijaweza kuswitch bado kwa Kiingereza. But wangapi wenu hapa, how many of you here are on TikTok ama Instagram? Show of hands. TikTok ama Instagram? Msiweke mkono chini. Kuna wengine wanadanganya. TikTok ama Dr. Pia sio? Haya, endeleeni kuweka mkono juu. Wangapi wenu hapa washawahi post, ama how many of you here have posted about the heritage in your city on either TikTok or your Instagram? You see? That's a challenge, eh? So let's use those platforms more accurately. Thank you. Over to you, Doctor. So please assist us with your Instagram and TikTok handles before you proceed. But
I'm not very good with TikTok and Instagram. I just watch clips of other people.
Okay. But thank you for being here. And we want to leverage on expertise. So the question will be, in your experience, what are the successful strategies for safeguarding urban heritage that you can speak of? Because I've been aware you've handled the case of the restoration of Makinon Market here in Mombasa, as well as other areas. So which strategies did you employ and which ones proved to be successful when it comes to urban heritage?
Mike mentioned about, actually he defined heritage. I want to classify heritage into two, okay? Before we continue. There is what is called the tangible heritage and the intangible heritage. Tangible heritage, it is something that you can touch. It can be a furniture, a seat, it could be a house, it could be jewelry, something that you can touch. Intangible is something that you cannot touch, and let's say dance. You cannot touch dance, you cannot touch poetry. So these are things that you cannot touch. Yes, they touch your heart, but you cannot touch intangible heritage. For me, if we talk about tangible heritage, Mombasa will not be Mombasa without Old Town. Okay? Mombasa, imagine Mombasa. Let me give you an instance. One day I was somewhere in Netherlands. We came up of the stairs, and then there was a wall-to-wall photograph of a town, of a city, beautiful city. Everybody was saying, this must be New York, this must be, I don't know, Hong Kong, this must be there. I just looked at that photograph and I saw Kenyatta International Conference Center. I said, this is Nairobi. The guys, my friends told me, this cannot be Africa, this cannot be Africa. I identified the city. I did not identify with the other buildings, but when I saw KICC, I said, this is Nairobi. And down there at the corner, it was written Nairobi, Kenya. And everybody said, how did you know? I knew it because of the Kenyatta International Conference Center. For example, where would Mombasa be without For Jesus behind there? You find every time when we close schools, April, August, December, go to For Jesus, you find hundreds of buses from upcountry coming to see what For Jesus is, because they learn about For Jesus in their history classes. How For Jesus was built, who built it, what happened. Actually, the history of Mombasa is the history of Kenya. The first capital of Kenya was Mombasa. Before the British came, they built the railway in 1902 to Nairobi. So if you look at the tangible heritage, or heritage that can be touched, I can mention a few buildings. I know you mentioned, I think you mentioned Makinon Market or something? Yes, you mentioned Makinon Market. Makinon Market, for those who know it, is on Abdi Nasser Road, basically in town. It's called Markiti, okay? I remember that was my project when I was at University of Nairobi. And the plan at that time was to demolish that Makinon Market and build a new housing complex. When I did my research, I said, no, there's a lot of history in this market. The market was built, and it was named after Henry Makinon, who was the governor at that time, 1914. And I did a project, a conservation project at University of Nairobi. I studied architecture. And then after that, I sent that project to the museums, and they really liked it. And then they started thinking, wow, we need to gazette, or we need to protect our heritage. You know, imagine that building of Makinon Market is not there, Mombasa. How would Markiti area be? Okay? That Markiti area today has grown because of that Makinon Market. But apart from what I call tangible heritage, look at the intangible heritage. Look at this rich Swahili poetry. Look at this Swahili pot. It's something to do with sana or art, something to do with mashairi, poetry, and heritage. I remember just next to Swahili pot, we have this Swahili Cultural Center. That's where the youth were being trained in traditional masonry, in traditional woodcraft, or furniture making. And that's where we recognized, when I was working in the museums, I recognized that the youth, after school, they have nowhere to go. So we started training them in traditional masonry and traditional wood carving and this kofia making. I don't know if you know this Swahili kofia. It's very, very expensive. And even up to today, women are being taught. Young school dropouts, standard 8 school dropouts, they're being taught there. And that's when we realize, heritage is not about buildings. Heritage is about human beings. What Mike said. It's about human beings. How we keep our heritage, I think that is important. Not how the heritage keeps us. Maybe I stop there.
Oh, thank you. Wow, I feel like I have had a crash course on Heritage 101. So, staying with you, Dr. Calendar. You say you have been working with the community, with the women and the youth. So how did you keep them engaged, especially when it came to the decision-making process, of promoting urban heritage for sustainable urban development?
I'll give you my example. When I just finished college, I was young then also, just like some of you here. And I joined the National Museums of Kenya, and I started working in Lamu. And museums had just started this conservation program in Lamu. And there was a lot of hue and cry from the community because they were told, don't do this, don't do that. Don't extend your building, don't develop your building. But they were not given solutions. Don't do this, but we will do this together. Okay, so there was a lot of issues, a lot of politics, and I said, actually, I regretted joining the museums at that time. I really regretted the challenge. It was very, very challenging. And then when I started working, they asked me, what new thing are you going to teach us? Our great-grandparents had conserved these buildings. What new thing are you going to tell us? I said, I'm not going to tell you anything, but we will work together. I will not work for you, but we will work together. So the first thing I started was awareness, education awareness. There's a saying that if you educate a man, you educate one man. But if you educate a woman, you educate a whole family. So what we did, we employed women education officers to go into the houses and start talking to the people. Why should we conserve our buildings? Why should we value our heritage? We've been doing that subconsciously, but we wanted to make it very conscious to them that you need to take pride in your heritage. You need to take pride in your buildings. You need to take pride in your culture. Today, as we are talking, I think December, Lamu will have a cultural week. Mombasa sometimes does have cultural week. So those things, they make this continuity of culture very, very possible. My strategy is you cannot work for the community or cannot work for the youth. You need to bring the youth as stakeholders. And even the Constitution says that if you need to do anything, you need to involve the stakeholders and everybody. So you need to work with the people, but most importantly, you need to give them awareness. You need to educate them on why should they preserve their heritage.
Thank you. So there you have it, people, people, people. That's the cornerstone of conservation and urban heritage. So right now I'd like to go to Sukaina. Hey Sukaina.
Hi.
Wow. What does Sukaina mean?
Tranquility.
Oh. Yeah, I could tell. That's why I had to ask.
Thank you.
Beautiful.
So, thank you.
Thank you, Mike.
We are talking about localizing SDG 11. And SDG 11 has everything to do with sustainable cities and development, talking of communities and the whole aspects of the targets, which also mentions urban heritage and the like. And you just mentioned that you work for the Mombasa Tourism Council?
Yeah, a board member of Mombasa Tourism Council.
A board member of the Mombasa Tourism Council. So, looking into SDG 11 and what it offers and the role you play, how do you think we can be able to leverage or use SDG 11 in advancing this agenda of urban heritage here in Mombasa?
Okay, so as someone who's a lover of business and economics, I love to mention the problem first before we discuss the solution. I love what everyone has mentioned already regarding, first of all, heritage being tangible and intangible. because I feel the intangible is what's getting lost in translation as generations pass. And being someone who is very, very passionate about what we have in terms of culture, because there's one sentence I've always lived by since a young age, which my grandparents told me was, mwenye kusahau asili ni mtumwa. I hope that's like correct how I've said it. And it always resonated with me and made me wonder, why is it so important to know where you come from and what you are and who you are? Because that defines where you're going to go. And I believe that actually can be taken and implemented into also the level of the county and the city and a country in itself. It works the same way. So the interesting thing is hundreds and hundreds of years ago when the Wareno came, which is the Portuguese, one of the things they made sure to do was destroy our history. So this is when our ancestors began also promoting the concept of poetry. It was a way of them communicating to each other, and also music. So through song, they were able to tell someone maybe on the next road, something is coming, using parables or animal references. And that was their form of communication, because anything that was written, anything that was engraved was destroyed by the colonizers. So this unfortunately created a knock-on effect which has come on generation to generation, whereby we have lacked the essence of documenting our history. As we go, we're supposed to be observing what has passed, but also creating current history in itself. And I feel that's where the major gap is, and that's one of the main reasons why I stepped into the world of joining, being appointed as a tourism council member, is because they realized how passionate I am about bringing back the heritage and culture which is getting lost. So although I wasn't born and raised in Mombasa, this is home. And my bloodline is from here. So I constantly come back and wanted to learn about it. And I can fully speak Kiswahili, by the way. Nakizungumza nakielewa, najifundisha. Wazazi wangu wanifundisha, lakini articulation for certain words, I'm still young and learning those particular formal Kiswahili. And that's when I realized also in Mombasa itself, we have people who have lost the language. Born and raised in Mombasa, but cannot have a full formal conversation in Kiswahili. And that triggered me, and adding to already the concept of history getting lost, I said, okay, now I need to get involved more into figuring out how we can solve this problem, because if we continue in the direction that we are, our history is going to be lost. So Professor had mentioned, and Calendar had mentioned about Old Town. See, the sad thing is majority of people would identify coastal history with only Old Town. And it's something that even our current generation and Gen Z and Gen Alpha, they only know Old Town. So we're losing all the other sites. Like McKinnon Market, the name of it gives me chills because it's a colonizer's name, but it has history. Colored people, black people, all of us, we were not allowed into that location. So when people actually learn that and realize, you know, we were not even allowed to set foot into this location, it gives you a sense of understanding. We have Chini Club right next to Fort Jesus as well. Colored people were also not allowed, unless you're an employee. But if you ask any Gen Z or Gen Alpha about this, they have no idea. For them, it's just Chini Club where they can go and have lunch. So it's history getting lost is why our youth are also getting lost. And also the older generation have also lost a lot of the knowledge, because knowledge is, sorry, is that me or you? Hello? I think my mic got offended. Okay, so not to deviate too much, going into Mombasa Tourism Council, the benefit of being able to sit on a board with stakeholders such as KTB, Tourism Fund, the county itself as well has a chair in there, it gives us the opportunity to bring together stakeholders which would help us to restructure, reorganize, and rethink our economic strategy in terms of the tourism and the heritage. Because our number one tourism call to Mombasa is history. So we have the fort, but many people don't know the full history of the fort. It should be something that as the indigenous people or as the people who live in the coast, we need to know all this information as the youth is growing. So I think education and awareness, which you had mentioned, is lacking. I feel even in international schools, there is nothing that teaches children or the youth about the coast. So how is it that all these students in all international schools are not being taught the language and they're not being taught the history of where they are? So the question is why? Because it feels like it's a systematic problem that it causes a knock-on effect on everything else. So if we look at Mombasa now, we're going into urbanization at a very, very high rate. And the risk of that is it's not necessarily a positive thing because we're losing a lot of what we have. See, even for us as coastarians, I believe the trees mark a lot of our history. And a lot of our trees have been destroyed. The history of the neem tree, the history of baobab tree, the history of the kilua, the jasmine trees, all these are getting lost. You actually have to pinpoint to find one. And before they were everywhere in the city and they all had a story behind them, they all had a reason, and they carried our history with them. But now people are coming to do construction. Trees are just being cut down because to them they have no purpose. Just a few days ago, I actually found out and learned that trees can actually recognize color. Trees in itself are a living being. So they have seen generations and generations of history, and we are just not even protecting them as the people of the coast. So as part of Tourism Council, we want to find a way to synchronize with the community and identify what makes Mombasa what it is. So we're going backwards now to discover who we are, Asilietu, what we are, what we're known for, what we should be known for, and actually capturing and saving what we have and then building on top of it. So I think that's how we can help, yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah, so I think in your explanation, you kind of answered the second part of the question, touching on the challenges that we get not to understand the history of certain elements of our heritage, and then we do away with it. So is there any other challenge that you might have, you might want to add to what you have been saying?
The biggest challenge that we have is lack of information and symmetric information, whereby people are actually sharing information across Mombasa. So if, for example, July is supposed to be Swahili month in a way because we have World Swahili Day. But let me just ask the audience, how many of you actually celebrated on the 9th of July? 2 people out of the whole crowd.
Who doesn't work at Swahili Port?
Okay, who doesn't work at Swahili Port? 1 person, 2 people.
Yeah.
3, you work in Swahili Port. Sema kweli. So 3 people out of the whole crowd, and 4, which is, it just tells you how information is not being shared. So for many years, if this has been a Swahili World Day, but us as the people in Mombasa ourselves are not celebrating it, it proves there's a problem. We are not embracing the beauty of our culture because we also have an identity crisis. So when it comes to heritage, we're supposed to have inclusivity in educating each other and learning about the history in itself. But because there's so much division in information and everyone wants to take a certain stance in the narrative of this information, it's creating confusion And now it's resulting in people separating from the information rather than embracing it. So I think it's about time we close the gap between the generations, because a lot of our professors have passed away who have been writing the history, and we only have maybe one left who, I think he passed away just a few months ago. So it's quite sad that we don't have those pillars still existing. Now the question is, who are we grooming to be the next the ones who will stand up to teach the culture from different schools, from local schools, international schools? And also, why aren't all these stakeholders and people in the community upholding things like Swahili, World Swahili Day? Why isn't the government very big on that day? I mean, we celebrate at a large scale when it comes to international holidays, religious holidays, yet we forget our own identity holidays. So I think information is the biggest problem that we have, and that needs to be sorted, and we need our own textbooks. We need our own digital information as well being shared, and also this journey of understanding Swahili culture needs to be addressed more.
Well, thank you. Just on the issue of Swahili Day, I think no one here will object on having an extra holiday, right? So whoever is involved in government should give us that day. Looking into that Swahili aspect, you see, there's that, just to add to what you're saying, there's usually that revisionist angle as well on how the history is communicated. Looking into Mombasa, we do understand initially Mombasa was a Swahili settlement. And we have records of 12th century by Ibn Battuta when he was doing his voyage. He found a Swahili settlement. Yes. But the recorded history, when it comes to Mombasa, in terms of heritage, we talk about the Omani, the arrival of the Omanis is when now we start being big on Mombasa. So there's that revisionist, how things are usually relayed as well. And also, how do you also communicate the good and the bad? Because for you to have a handover from one civilization to the next, it is either forceful or merger. You know, you come together and work as one. But we know here in Mombasa, it wasn't a merger, it was more or less forceful. But we see the kind of remnants when it comes to Swahili settlements, especially with the baobabs. Even here, as I was climbing down, I saw one, and it got me thinking, maybe this was a settlement before the occupation. So how we relay that should also be important, and thank you for bringing that up. Yes, ndugu yangu. No, I can see the way you're looking at me. You've been training for this moment, yeah?
Yeah.
It's your turn now.
No, I was wondering, why are you leaving me out? Or were you planning me to like conclude everything just because I come from the origin of heritage here in the coastal region?
No, they say you save the best for last.
Okay.
Yeah. So, ukwaje?
Mimi niko poa. Mimi niko
Abdultwalib.
Naam.
Shafahamu.
Unataka niongee Kiswahili nikukoroge ama niongee Kiingereza unifahamu?
Well,
yes.
We'll talk about that later on.
Okay.
But now, to the most pressing issue.
Uh-huh.
You've mentioned that you have a hub in Lamu.
Yes.
So, for me, and you're a youth.
Uh-huh.
That's like a success story, you know?
Okay.
So, what are the other success stories of youth or community involvement when it comes to propagating the urban heritage story here in Kenya?
I think the best way you could have addressed is what initiated you to establish this hub. Yeah?
All right. You can tell us more about yourself then?
It all started with a poem that was written by the name which is associated again to the hub, Kijuma. So once when I was just roaming around, I just ended up hearing okay. So I came across a poem that he had narrated when he was in Zanzibar regarding how he was feeling lonely, isolated from his city. At first I was angry because the last or the chorus was kuwa ni mbali na amu. Like kuwa ni mbali na amu. If you say it fast, it means like telling people stay away from Lamu. Yeah? But when I listened keenly to that poem, it was telling me that he was so interested in the people of Lamu that he was feeling lonely that he's away from the village. So this led me to ask myself, if someone in the 70s, in the 60s, was feeling this way, what was so special about this place? So I had to go back to my place. I started doing some research on the town, and since I had studied civil engineering, I decided to base myself with the urban, with the old structures. And it is amazing that I'm surprised that here the quorum is not as many as I was expecting. But if this audience here,
the other breakout is called Bonyezo Pate Dollar, so maybe.
And that's why I'm saying, if they knew how urban heritage is a mining or is a quarry for a lot of gems and stones, they could have been here listening to whatever is or the capacity of the urban heritage. So in 2021, I was volunteering with the Lamu Museums because I decided that was the best institution to do my research or to gain my knowledge. And when I was doing my community engagement, doing formal and non-formal interviews with the locals, I came to realize, like my colleagues have said, the lack of indigenous knowledge in the local community is a bigger problem. So how am I going to address it? I started lobbying by having some forums in the institutions or in the schools, but it didn't work. So what happened is I had to sit down with the Lamu Museums team, and the best approach was, why don't we establish a space where we can do this, or we can disseminate this information or this knowledge that we feel it is not given to the local community regarding their heritage, understanding it and how they can leverage it so that they can prosper using their own heritage. So that's why in 2022 we worked on the establishment of Kijuma Heritage Hub, and last year we established the first heritage hub in Lamu, which is the Kijuma Heritage Hub. So the hub currently is doing the promotion and educating the young people in Lamu on how they can leverage, first understanding their own heritage and how they can leverage their own heritage in improving their socioeconomic activities.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much. So what I'm getting from what you're saying, mobilizing of minds and, you know, people who think like you to form something that can be able to advance that discussion was one of the successful stories you can give us when it comes to
that is just one. If you want me, I can list them many.
All right.
Because the first initiative was, we decided as, because I chair the Lamu Heritage Site Community Organization, which is a local youth organization dealing with matters to do with capacity building in matters to do with heritage, right? So our first initiative was, how are we going to access this information? Which is why we went to Lamu Museum. And we partnered with the museum to establish the Kijuma Heritage Hub. What's next? We had already gathered this information. The next thing was doing activities to the community so that they can understand that the community or the youth have the energy to do or to prosper the urban heritage. So in 2022, through the Kenya Tourism Board and Magical Kenya, under the Sustainable Tourism Project, which I believe happened even here in Mombasa, we as the community were able to disseminate tour guiding trainings and cleanups activities in the old town. And the most effective one was rehabilitating the seafront benches, which were used by not just locals, but even tourists as a resting area when they arrive in Lamu. And just recently, last year, what we managed to do is we started to document the Lamu Old Town, and or by the use of the virtual reality and extended reality technologies, we are working on documenting the old town into the metaverse, so that tomorrow, when another pandemic just like Corona happens, Bwana Moderator, if you're in Mombasa and you need to visit Lamu, you can get into the metaverse, see yourself in the boat. If you need to ride a donkey, you can ride a donkey, move around the street, and just while you are seated on your bed. So that is the future of heritage and conservation that we are seeing in Lamu.
Wow, thank you. Well, that's a great initiative you're undertaking. One thing, I went to the Lamu Museum like 2 months ago, and I went to the upper section, and then I felt I'm in the metaverse, as you're saying. Like I felt I'm in another country, so maybe you can look into that,
Yeah.
if you know what I mean. Then, I can see Daktari is laughing. So, looking at what you're doing, yeah? And then it comes to Lamu. You've said you're a civil engineer by training.
Yes.
So building or built environment is part of the things you look into or you do.
Mm-hmm.
Now, what are the traditional techniques or materials that were being used or can be used or are still being used in Lamu or any other heritage zone that can be used to enhance resilience in the wake of climate change, especially in heritage cities?
When we start talking about the building materials, all the traditional materials, the first thing that is going to be shot on your head is how are you going to get these traditional materials? It is so hard because of the current policies that are being implemented in the old towns, not just in Lamu but even here in Mombasa. But obtaining traditional materials has been so expensive. But the approach that I've been using is, why don't we have another policy, just like the way we are having these heritage policies, such that we can try to maintain or we can try produce the traditional materials, but specifically in securing or conserving the heritage assets within the old town. Because what led to all these issues was the traditional materials were not just only used in the old town or the heritage or the conservation areas, but they were used commercially even outside Kenya. That's why we had a lot of these problems of climate change and everything. So these are some of the things that we are trying to leverage. Like if we are going to produce the traditional materials, then we need to use them in the heritage aspect. Again, another challenge is sustainability of the traditional materials. If I'm to tell a local youth here, the process of making the traditional lime, everyone is going to tell me that I will prefer cement than lime. But if I am to tell them, in 10 years, the effect of lime that is going to give you is much better than the cement that you are trying to use. Because I can give, because I'm an engineer, right? So while studying the old structures in Lamu, I came to realize that most structures used not to have this 1.5 meter by 0.5 meter windows. We used to have small shattered windows. So I was wondering, with all this massive structure, how was the cooling system in this urban area? So these are some of the things that the young generation can venture themselves in and see how they can leverage the information that they're getting in the universities, but again adapt it in the heritage sector. So the traditional lime was the one that was giving the cooling effect to these old buildings. But who will know if you don't do research on them? We have the heritage aspect there. Everyone now is fighting to construct massive buildings just using cement, because in 1 year the whole structure is done. But if we are to use the traditional lime, then I'm telling you, it will take you about 5 to 10 years to construct a whole building. But that same building is the one that is going to live for the next 1,000 years, which are the kind of buildings that we are having in Lamu. But tell me, which kind of building made of concrete has survived even more than 50 years?
Oh, thank you. Thank you. That's really nice. What's the local name of the traditional lime, if I may ask?
The traditional lime?
Yeah, it has a local
so we
name?
have two types of lime.
Okay.
We have traditional lime made from the coral stones, and we have the most expensive one is the traditional lime made from seashells.
Do they have a local name?
A local name?
Yeah, from Lamu.
I think my mentor can answer that if there is a local name.
This is a smart guy.
Lime is toka.
Choka.
So toka, we have different types of lime. We have the traditional and we have the hydraulic. So most people tend to use the hydraulic, which is more so like just like using cement.
Right. So at this point, I want to also engage the audience. We have an open session. Just 2 questions. Maybe, yes, I can say, 3. But I'd like to ask you a question as, 4. We also like to ask you a question, and then you can answer the question as you ask your question. Am I making sense? No? All right. So, we've heard about climate change, yeah? And you have heard about the houses which can last for 1,000 years in heritage cities. But we still know climate change affects heritage areas, especially the ones which have a long history or were there from beginning of time maybe. So how might you say climate change affects heritage cities, and how does this present itself in our urban areas? So maybe you can have the first gentleman there answering that. Oh, sorry, you already had one. Okay, go ahead.
Thank you very much. Do you need me standing or just seated like this?
Whichever you like.
Okay, fine. I think I'll first like to answer your question. Based on the discussion that was up there on plenary session 2, there was something that was very interesting that was mentioned, yeah? Which is, first of all, as we talk about climate change, it's a must that we domesticate the climate bills into our counties and incorporate them so that we can take the funds towards achieving or rather solving the climate crisis that we have in our counties. And that is mostly affecting our coastal region. So now this is a high time that we start domesticating and like going a long way to solving the climate crisis that we have. So that is now answered, I think. I believe that. And now I have like 2 questions. I had 5, but now just limit to 2 because of time. And I'm very glad. First of all, my name is Ibrahim Mohammed. I am a civil engineer. I'm very happy to also meet my fellow civil engineer here. And just like engineers, I'll ask, like the question will be based more on the engineering side, okay? And I'd like to start with the first question based on the heritage preservations that we are actually looking forward to. And how can cities like Mombasa and other cities like Lamu, with regards to the heritage that they contain, how can we balance between the modern urban development with the preservation of its rich culture that we have? And particularly, I'm specifying the cities because we have areas like Mombasa County and Lamu. This is the cities that I'm actually looking forward to. And another question will be based more on the green infrastructure. What can we do, or rather what role does green infrastructure play in developing resilient and sustainability urban spaces, especially in Mombasa? And how can coastal cities adapt to these nature-based solutions to urban challenges? Are they, is that fine, or do you need more questions?
Maybe you can take 2 more.
I can, from me, or?
No, from any other person. Thank you. We'll take them quickly because of time. Please.
I'll have to stand because I'm triggered. When you say about urban heritage, I am standing on behalf of many educationists and teachers where the teenagers and the students currently are the leaders or are the people who you want heritage to continue. But my question is, as much as all the organizations and all the works you have done, there's no much incorporation of children at the moment. Ministry of Education has given out the aspect of extracurricular activities so that many things can be touched, not only on the curricula, that is the mathematics, biology, and all that. For example, Sukaina with the Tourism Council, I feel there's so much to be done in our schools so that we're able to know. For example, it is very, very sad if a school in Mombasa wants to come to Fort Jesus, to learn about Fort Jesus, there's a fee for them. And you people, the same people saying, we want urban heritage and how we can do all that. And there's so many illustrations about how children can really take these matters up. So I feel you can discuss with other people, and also you can answer this question on how you can include inclusivity with the children at the moment in our schools.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for this opportunity. Once again, good evening, everyone. My question goes to Madam Sukaina. I want to ask, what is the county government of Mombasa currently doing to embrace culture and heritage? Because when we talk of culture and heritage, or we talk about youth affected with culture, I think we're not helping, because recently we've been doing some focus group discussions, and most of the people who we were targeting are youth between 18 to 35. And when I remember last year, we were having a convening in Mombasa, and we were having a shared video, and I was talking of how Mombasa is beautiful with geographical sites like beaches. And my governor answered and said, we don't only have geographical sites like beaches, we also have cultural diversities in Mombasa. While when we were having the focus group discussions, youths were telling us, I'm having my own culture because of the stereotypes that I'm going through, or my culture is going through, like, oh, kabila yetu ina uchawi mwingi, oh, kwetu ntarogwa. So I want my own culture. So do you think that the moment we talk about culture and the type of cultural effects we have, na kijana ana maoni yake yeye mwenyewe ya kuwa, ndiyo mimi nazungumzia kuhusu culture and heritage, but mimi mwenyewe nataka kuwa na culture yangu. Do you think or do you feel that by the end of the 10 or 15 years that we are going to have, we won't have any culture in Mombasa, because kila kijana ataamua kuwa mimi nataka kabila hili, mimi sitaki kabila hili. Yeah, so naomba na niko na hamu ya kujua serikali yenu ya county umetupangia mipango ipi husiana na culture and heritage. Thank you so much.
Hello everyone. I was actually touched by the session that was ongoing. As Mr. Engineer mentioned, I think there should have been more people than we are right now. But we are grateful for whatever we learned. And I want to compliment what Sukaina mentioned in terms of the lack of information. And like she mentioned, I feel like we have to know where we are coming from to build into where we are going to. That is very, very important. And I want to, if you allow me, I want to make a reference to one of the books that I read that really captivated my mind, and it's called Lamu, the Enchanted Island. I don't know how many people have come across that book by a show of hands. Okay, so that book has quite valuable information about Lamu and the coastal region in general. And what I learned from that book is basically we are a pearl. And the Kenya coastal region is a pearl, not just in East African coast or the coast of Africa, but the entire world at large. And to be honest, like, we have been instrumental from the past to currently as we speak. Like, we are very important. We play a major role in the world economic demographics, and that is the reality. And there's something that captivated me from that book, and allow me to raise my question from that. Because basically, one of the things that made cost to be known were the things that we used to do. And you find that most of the activities that were being done were mainly out of innovation, things that were passed on from generations by our great-grandfathers. Like, the father used to be, let's say, a skillsman, wale wanauchonga mbao, like the chairs you guys are sitting on. So such kind of talent is not being passed on to the generation like the way it used to go, as what they used to do before. So what are the plans to make sure that these kind of skills don't die? Because it doesn't have to be we are waiting for employment, but I feel like such kind of skills, and one of them is like craftsmanship of chairs like this. And Another thing is like that kofia Mr. Abu Talib is wearing on that photo, if you allow me to use that as an example. That kofia, I can tell you the cheapest is going for 20,000. That is the cheapest. So such kind of skills, people were being taught by fathers. So what is the plan by the tourism board, by Kenya at large? How are we looking back at whatever skills that used to be there so that we can push on leveraging on such socio-economic activity? Thank you.
Wow, thank you. So quickly, I'd like to put these questions to the panelists. Whoever wants to take it first, please. Skaina.
Okay, so I'll go first. So I remember there was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 questions. First, I want to address the concept of the county. Let's get that first of all. So I'm in the Mombasa Tourism Council, which includes stakeholders within the tourism industry. So Tourism Fund has a seat. A Kenya Tourism Board has a seat. We have KATA, which is Kenya Airline Tourism Association. So all main stakeholders in the tourism industry sit. And I actually sit as a private representative for the youth and for the community of Mombasa. So technically when I sit in there, I'm not a county representative. I'm representing all of you in front of the county. So they have a seat in that board as well. And we are now, like I mentioned before, we are working backwards. See, we can't come with proposals, let's do this project, let's do this project. When we entered, we said, no, we don't want to look at projects first. Let's look at the problem that we have on the table. What is the problem that we have in Mombasa before we start proposing solutions, because that might not be relevant to what we are going through. So the first one was to do with, the question was to do with cultural issues. And I absolutely agree with that, because I'd mentioned before, every single community within the coast also has its own identity and its own cultural references. Now, Swahili is taken more as a blanket culture. It's something that unites all of us, not based on just bloodline, but it's also a culture or language that unites us as people. That's why Swahili civilization starts all the way up from Kismayu, all the way up from even further up, and Kismayu is actually Kiamu. I'm actually Mwamu as well, by the way. Kiamu is Kismayu. So the well that is at the top, but that's in Somalia, but it's a Kiswahili word. And it goes all the way down to Sofia, Mozambique. So it's not a country. Swahili is a civilization. And now when we look at the different culture and tribes that we have within the coast, this is where the problem comes. We have been polluted and our cultures have been diluted to the point that we only see the small negatives within. So if I ask someone, what do you think about a Swahili? Wavivu, hawataki kufanya kazi. And I'm like, excuse me, I'm standing right in front of you. So where is that stereotype coming from? So we actually have a major problem of self-hate that we are trying to help the youth to remove that, to make them realize the beauty of what they are. And the reason we have this, it goes back to the comment I said about mwenye kusahau asili ni mtumwa. Because our children and generations have forgotten who they are, the civilization they come from, the inventions they came with, the buildings, the architecture, they've forgotten all of their value, that they no longer see their value, and they start now self-hate and dividing each other. That's why we're seeing most of us are trying to follow Western culture, which Western don't have a culture. They're taking from us and making something beautiful out of it. For example, if we just, I'll deviate for a second in terms of financial. If we look at the financial world, in terms of banking system, we already have something that people till now they do, chama. Right? How many of you muko kwenye chama? See, I love that he's not shy. He's like, me. It's okay. And that's a beautiful thing. See, the banking system couldn't understand how people are creating loans in their own little communities. That's a cultural thing. They took it and turned it into something else and gave a Nobel Prize to someone in the East for an idea that has been existing for thousands of years within our culture. So now I think what we'll do to move forward, as I take that responsibility to represent your voices, to make people feel that it's okay to say, you know what, mini kabila hii, but at the same time, mi pia ni Mswahili, because we're all Swahili under this roof. But the more we start to appreciate what we are, the more beauty that will come out of it. And we will not lose our culture, and we will make sure that we don't, inshallah. Yeah? So now moving to second, regarding the children. Sabri is a huge advocate for education and children, and he runs something called Kumbusha Mwanafunzi, which I love. So it's about helping parents and teachers learn how to help build these young minds. So when it comes to teaching them heritage, I'm actually appalled to hear that they need to pay a fee to go. Maybe you can help with this. Yes? Our children should not be paying a fee to learn about their own history. So if I have to pay someone to tell me, so what color do I like? I'm going to stop paying to figure out who I am and just let it be, because I don't know the importance of it. So it is our responsibility, and I will make sure I put that across. Remember, I mentioned about information is a problem. I appreciate when people share and say, you know what, this is a problem that we have, so we can incorporate it into when we sit on the table with them. Yeah, I promise. Okay? Thank you. Now, the question you had mentioned, I'm trying to remember from memory if I'm getting all the questions right, was to do with how we can incorporate urban and heritage into our architecture. Kind of, somewhere there? Yeah? Are any of you familiar with the building called Swahili Gem in Chuda? Okay, maybe if I describe it, you'll know it. You know that building that's like looks like it's made of coral, and then it has like the white shapes on it? Ah, see, all the guys are like, yeah. Have any of you seen it? You've seen it? Have you? What do you guys think of that building? It literally is a Swahili gem, right? Because it took, the architect is actually a young Mwamu who went to Germany, which is one of the best places to learn architecture, and he came back and he incorporated Swahili architecture into modern architecture. So he made sure that he created a building, and when you enter inside, by the way, some of the patio sides of the building actually have a cutout somewhere, like, for example, this is a sitting room. Right there next to the sitting room, there's like cutout and there's just a tree randomly. Because they built around the nature. They built with the idea of coral, which covers the whole building, before they put the white on top. Even the windows, they're kind of shaped very different. It's not the block square windows. You'll see some are small triangles. So that's incorporating culture into modern architecture, which is the biggest problem we have in Mombasa. It's driving me crazy to see all these tall buildings which are coming up. And as the youth, we're supposed to stand up because it is withering and destroying our history. Our pavements are being taken over all by Cabro, which is nice, but why are we not building around the trees? Like if you see in Germany, for example, their pavements are almost the size of this stage. And it's all Cabro, but literally in the middle is a tree. There's no way you're gonna walk, there's no tree. We have that. Why are we destroying it? Why do you think Mombasa Island is becoming so hot? It's because we are trying to modernize in a way that it not makes sense with our tropical island. Mangroves are being destroyed, which is one of the materials they use for the wood as well, type of wood to make furniture, right? But back in the day, once they take, they also plant. So right now we are taking at a rate which is actually affecting our sea levels, and it is affecting the inhabitants and the animals which are within the mangroves. Right now here you were mentioning about architecture as well with Old Town and how we need to pay maybe the county more so they can implement more. You didn't say about paying a fee for it to come back to climate. Oh, okay, sorry. So, for example, we have sewage piping that has recently been opened. We have like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, starting from Old Town to the ferry. and it is only like a proximity within our area, which by law it's supposed to be 12 miles into the ocean. But we're all quiet. Do you see the problem? Do you know why the water is changing color? It's becoming darker and darker. That's what you had yesterday for lunch. It's literally making all our sea life run away. That's why wasikia watu hakuna samaki Mombasa. Have you guys heard that? Show of hands, have you heard hakuna samaki Mombasa? We're actually even eating fish from the river. And we are surrounded by the ocean. But we're using modern architecture which is not suitable for our type of architecture. Okay, so just to end it, for example, Old Town, I love what Abu Talib had mentioned, is incorporating for the heritage sites to actually have the old material being used. Like for me, when I look at Old Town, now you're just seeing pockets of history. But you don't see it like how you would, for example, in Barcelona, if you go to Catalonia. The whole place is just screaming history. The whole place is the same color. Not the hospital color we have, white and blue, but cappuccino, like the walls there. So even if it gets dirty, it looks historical. The whole city is cream. And then they have bike lanes everywhere. And I think people who watch my Instagram have seen me ranting about we need to be a bike city. I would be riding a bike around Mombasa. But there's so many cars that you want to pull your hair out. It doesn't look like an island anymore. That's what I mean by we're losing our heritage. Is also by architecture. I love that you brought that point up. And I love that you mentioned we need to incorporate it because architecture is one of the main historical languages in heritage that we're losing. I'll end it there because I'm too passionate. I'll go on.
Wow, thank you. So,
Bueno,
that's a really passionate
Hello.
plea. Yeah, please, as we conclude, please, let's keep it at a minimum and then we can wrap it up. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think he had concerns that were not addressed yet. Engineer, you are asking about how we can balance our engineering knowledge with the heritage, right? Yeah. There is one problem. Our institutions are scrutinized because the only area that there is the aspect of heritage and engineering is along the Kenyan coast. If you go into the interior, you won't find any aspect of heritage engineering. But it is so unlucky that our university, the only engineering that we are taught is using massive concrete and steel works. Yeah? So what I can urge you is get back to know your own heritage first, just like the way I did. I decided to go to where the origin is, know the conservation measures, and it is from there that you can understand how you can balance your engineering knowledge with the heritage aspect and how we can prosper this field. If I can add to Mwalimu, Sabir, you're asking about paying fees for the children. Yeah? You are lucky, I can tell you, because you have Swahili Pot Hub here in Mombasa. So what I can tell you is, as an educator, come ask support from Swahili Pot so that they can give you space. Wale vijana ambao wanasomeshwa wanalipia huko, wewe enda tafuta hiyo elimu ya heritage ya turathi, kuwa nayo, walete hao vijana wa miaka kidogo, walete hapa Swahili Pot wafundishe. These are the kind of partnerships Swahili Pot even need. They need not just to see young people from 15 to 35. They need even as low as 4 years, 5 years, so that they can come here and they can be taught about their heritage. Thank you.
Thank you so much. We can now have final thoughts from Nyanjala and Dr. Kalanda.
Asante daktari. Vijana, wito wangu ni kwamba kuhusiana na masuala yetu ya kiasilia na urithi tuliandikiwa. Yalikuwepo, wazazi wetu wakaandika kwenye vipande vya miti, wakaja wengine wakaharibu, wakaandika. Ni wakati wa kuandika historia ya urithi wetu na utamaduni. Nitawapa mfano mdogo. Bongo Flava ambayo inapendwa na sasa hivi inachezwa Mombasa, vijana wa Mombasa wanaijua kushinda Tanzania. ilianza mwaka 1990. Kuna wasanii ambao nitakutajia hapa hautowajua, lakini leo kila mtu akimsikia Diamond atasema ni Bongo Flava. Sasa tuchukulie 1990 mpaka leo ni miaka mingapi? Kwa hiyo hapo tayari tuna swala la kitamaduni na urithi. Kwa hiyo tuandike hizo historia. Nasikia watu hata amesema vijana ni viongozi wa kesho. Nyie mna nguvu ya leo. Nguvu mlionayo hakuna alionayo. So kila kitu kwenu iwe ni kufanya. Mnaona kwa nini tuna bahari pale? Sisi ni watoto wa majini. Hatuwezi kuitwa tuko Pwani ikatajwa kutoka huko Lamu mpaka Mozambique bila kuelewa maana ya ile bahari. Ile bahari ni urithi wetu na utamaduni wetu. Tukitoka kule tukija huku tunaongezea. Ndio maana tutaelewa maana ya nini tutumie hizi teknolojia na hizi akili nyingi na lugha wanazotueleza za akili mzio at Python language na JavaScript. Basi tuweke humo, mtu yoyote akija akisema ana scan apate ile taarifa ambayo tumeishiriki kuitengeneza. Asante.
Asante. Umesikia, nyinyi ni watoto wa? Nataka mrudie, nyinyi ni watoto wa? Ni kweli? Majini? Sawa.
Wacha nizungumze Kiswahili, pengine watu wanashaka labda sijui Kiswahili. Kiswahili ni lugha yangu ya kwanza ya nyumbani mimi langu ni kusema kwa sisi wazee mbio zetu zishakwisha. Ni kama relay. Hii mambo ya turathi, mambo ya heritage ni relay, sio sprint. Kwa hivyo sisi mbio zetu zimekwisha, tushakimbia tunavyokimbia. Sasa ni kupatia gongo yule mtu mkimbiaji wa mwisho, kama ni Usain Bolt, kama ni Carl Lewis mnamjua, amalize ile mbio. Na huyo tutakaye kumpa hicho kigongo ni nyinyi vijana Gen Z. Ni mchukue hii turathi, heritage, mkimbie nayo, kwa sababu tuna miaka mingapi sisi wazee kuishi? Hatuna tena miaka. Nyinyi mna miaka, mna future mzuri Kwa hivyo mchukue ile turathi muibebe, sio nyumba peke yake. Mashairi imetajwa hapa. Mashairi ilikuwa ni revolution, ilileta revolution. Watu wakitukanana kwa mashairi, watu wakisifiana kwa mashairi. Najua hapa kuna washairi wengi Swahili Pot wanafanya ushairi. So tuchukue hizi tuzikuze zaidi, ili na sisi watoto, sisi tumewapatia nyinyi, alafu nyinyi mkishindwa, ama sio kushindwa, mkimaliza mbio zenu mupatie ile gongo, mwapatie watoto wenu na wajukuu, na turathi tuendelee kwa miaka na miaka itakayokuja. Asanteni.
Naam, asanteni. Nami for final thoughts, ningependa nionyeshe hizo chama ambazo mmesema mko, na ningependa kurudi hiyo kofia pia mimi. Kofia moja ni 20,000, kwa hivyo sina nguvu jamaa. Na kuweza kumalizia, kuna swali sijauliza kwa sababu nimeona it has been spoken and it is actually the best climax I could find from what you have been discussing. Nilikuwa na swali kwa nauliza profit over people. Je, hizi heritage tunataka kuweka kukuza, tunazikuza ndio tuweze kutumia kupata pesa so that we can get money, we can enrich ourselves, ama kwa sababu tungependa iendelee kwa kitu kinaitwa posterity, ambapo in the future watu watakaa waseme kulikuwa na kizazi hiki ambacho kiliweza kuturathi mambo kama kofia kama ya Bwana Abdul Twalib, design za nyumba zimesemwa, mashairi, leso, sio? Haya, the green space ambazo tuko nazo pia ni urathi tunaweza peana kwa kizazi kinachokuja, na hicho ni ama hiyo ni part of heritage. Mimi naomba mnipigie makofi kwa Kiswahili. Sijazungumza Kiswahili ndefu kama kwa muda mrefu. Kwa hivyo ningemalizia na kusema let us all strive to ensure posterity when it comes to urban heritage for the people. Heritage only makes sense when it's centered on people. Na ningependa kujua kama Professor Mike Tana bado yuko online, tuweze kupata his final thoughts. Kama yuko ni sawa pia. Naam. Sidhani yuko. So nafurahia sana kuweza kuwa moderator wenu, na tuendelee kuweka urathi wetu hadi wakati tutaputana tena. Asanteni.
Thank you very much. Asante sana Nation Njoroge. Labda cameraman tunaweza pata group photo. Let's have a group photo here, please. Balance. Yeah. Yes. Songeni mbele kidogo. Cameraman mko sawa? Aya, asanteni sana. Tunashukuru nyote. Asanteni sana. Asante DJ. Labda tu kusema hiki ndio kikao chetu cha mwisho siku hii ya leo, lakini ikiwa inaelekea saa 11 na robo, kuna entertainment, kuna bandi na kuja hapa Mombasa Entertainment Band, kuna Kalaze Vidze pia tunamtarajia hapa aje perform, na Fatma Mwijuma ambaye atakuwa ni spoken word. Nadhani tutaachia hapo. Asanteni sana kwa kuweza kufika siku hii ya leo. Nadhani tutaendelea kesho vizuri, ile entertainment kwa wale ambao wanapenda burudani. DJ, usukani ni wako. Asante.